Good morning and welcome back to Bible Break. And we've got a pretty long reading as far as I can make out this morning. So we're going to, without further ado, we're just going to get straight on with it. We're in Mark chapter 6 and we're reading from verse 30 through to verse 56. That is the end of the chapter. And I'm reading from the NIV as usual. So let's go. The apostles gathered round Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. By this time it was late in the day, so his disciples came to him. "This is a remote place," they said, "and it's already very late. Send the people away so they can go to the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." But he answered, "You give them something to eat." They said to him, "That would take 8 months of a man's wages. Are we to go and spend that much on bread and give it to them to eat?" "How many loaves do you have?" he asked. "Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and fifties. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. The number of the men who had eaten was 5,000. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went into the hills to pray. When evening came, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. About the 4th watch of the night, he went out to them walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them. When they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it's I, don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout that whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And everywhere he went, into villages, towns, or countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak, and all who touched him were healed. So let's take this step by step, as we like to do generally. And you will have noticed the very first verse that we read, that once again, it's a question here, the disciples, or as they are named here, the apostles. Apostle is a word that means messenger. And the disciples who were learning from Jesus were also going out and preaching his message, the same message. So that's what makes them apostles. And they were excited. Boy, were they excited. And they were so happy to gather around their teacher, their master, and tell him everything that they had done and taught. Of course, they had been given his authority, his power, and they had gone out in his name. But it was them, and they were excited. And I'm sure that Jesus was very happy for them. But perceiving what their need was at this moment, he reckoned that they needed food and rest. So that was his suggestion or his instruction, that they find a quiet spot now where they could get some food and rest after a busy time. It's what we all like to do, isn't it? After a busy time, let's just crash out somewhere, have some food and have some rest. Certainly how I feel at the end of the day. I'm sure that's how most of us feel. They couldn't, though, because there is such a momentum now that, like good paparazzi press, the crowd is sort of monitoring their movements and catching on to where they're heading all the time and actually getting there before them. So they sort of turn, rocking up to the place where they're going to have food and rest, and there's a big crowd there waiting for them. And I don't know about you, but when I'm tired and hungry, what's that advert on the telly? You're not you when you're hungry. It's for some chocolate bar, I think. You're not you when you're hungry. Yeah, that's true. Or when I'm tired. And, I get a bit ratty, to be honest, when I'm tired and hungry, if demands are then going to be placed upon me. Not so the Lord Jesus. He is filled with compassion when he sees the crowd, and pity, we could say, because he sees them as being like sheep without a shepherd. Compassion and pity are not the welcome responses of many people in need today. People like to assert their own independence and their own abilities. But Jesus himself sees that people are lost and that people are in need, and that there are many needs which need to be met and which are not being met. So his response, as is always the case, his priority is that he begins to teach them many things, because the idea, yes, is not that people be infantilized, but that people learn, that people receive from teaching, from instruction, and from wisdom and experience then, as they put these things into practice, and that they do stand on their own 2 feet. Well, no, that they trust God, but that they trust God, just as the disciples had come back and were delighting in the fact of what had happened as they had gone out trusting God and trusting in the one who sent them. But this kind of compounds the problem now, because it's not just Jesus and the disciples that need food and rest. There's now this great multitude that's with them. The day's drawing on, it seems. And the disciples are going to be worried, because they see the need of the moment, and they reckon it's time that the crowd shut off before the shop shut. Jesus says to the disciples, well, you give them something to eat. Now, the interesting thing about this, because as I say, we've always got to see these things in context, is that our reading started with the disciples coming back and excitedly telling Jesus of everything that they had said and everything that they had done in his name. And now Jesus here is telling them to give the crowd something to eat. And they don't cotton on to the fact that this, again, is with his backing, obviously, with his authority. He's the one who's telling them to do it, and they would be doing it in his name. But everything that they did when they were sent out was fine. But this is just way beyond them now. So the point is, for everything that we do say and that we do, and everything that we do learn, there is always obviously a zillion times more with Jesus that we have yet to see, that we have yet to understand, that we have yet to learn. And so Jesus does it. He does make use of what's there. There is magic here. Call it miracle, magic. There is real magic here. But it's not out of thin air. When I say magic, I don't think the 5 loaves and the 2 fish are a prop. But the story in John, isn't it, is that there's a young lad who provides these. And, the point seems to be now that we do have to give the little that we have to Jesus and see what he will do with it. And what he does do with it is that he looks up to heaven, gives thanks, and gets on with it. Starts the breaking of the bread and the distribution. And we are told, miraculously, that by the time that he'd finished, and that they had finished, the crowd, all ate and were satisfied. And just to drive the lesson home, we are told that the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish, and that 5,000 people had been fed. Well, to drive the lesson home, to drive what lesson home? Well, to drive the lesson home of God's limitless resources for God's work. God can provide and will provide what's needed when it's needed, and miraculously. Yes, we must provide what we can. Yes, we must think about our own needs and requirements for example, food and rest. But why would you leave God out of the equation when it comes to the necessities of life? And I know that what I'm saying is of a particular poignancy for some of us who are fighting a real fight at the present time, in the face of very, very sharp odds. I'm talking to people here I know who in recent days, because of their principled stand, have lost their job for reasons of their own health and dignity, have been prepared to, it seems, go out on a limb. But as you've gone out on a limb, I would encourage you to take the little that you have got now and take it to God and look up to heaven and seek God's face at this time. And then, as if that isn't enough, as they depart then in the boat and they're struggling, on the waves, the disciples. Jesus, in the meantime, has gone into the hills to pray. He prayed for the meal. He's praying now about we know not what, but what we do know is that when he's finished praying, he walks on the water to where the disciples are and gets into the boat. And once again, the wind dies down as he's there. They're amazed and terrified. But we are told that it was because they had not understood about the loaves. That this man, Jesus, knows God and knows of hidden resources which are in God, which are being made available to him as they have been made available to the disciples. And then that is further reinforced as they go on to the next place, and all the sick there are healed as they touch the cloak of the Lord Jesus. And you may have noticed, but there are things that are, such as touching the hem of Jesus' garment, there are things which are picked up here, which we've already come across in the previous readings, but as the momentum builds up of need, so the momentum of the ministry is built up. So the same things are repeated, but in an even greater measure as God makes available his resources for meeting the need as it presents itself. Jesus himself has said, that the more you give out, be careful of the measure that you receive and the measure that you give, because it's that measure that you will keep getting back, and then that you will keep giving out. And that's what we're seeing here. So I'll see you next time. I'll leave you with that. I'll see you next time. Bye.